Would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Hello and welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric, from the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all. Join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter, and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. If you enjoy the show and find it of value, consider supporting and becoming a patron via the Patreon at patreon.com/philosophicalminds. A small contribution makes a big difference and definitely makes it easier for me to continue the show, although I will always do my best to keep it flowing regardless. Thank you all, and let's get into it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Philosophical Minds podcast. Tonight, I'm joined with Jesse Leith, founder of Anki Organics Apothecary, alchemist, and herbalist. How you doing tonight? Or today, in your instance, on the other side of the world.
That's right. Yeah, afternoon. Going well. Good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Sunny Australia, looking pretty beautiful. So I wanted to ask you one thing in particular that I just thought might be interesting in regard to one of your posts, and I don't think that we touched on it. We may have, if so, that's okay. But you were creating azulene terpenes, and I think what was written in the post, you said the compounds are not present prior to the distillation, but they're created during the process. And then it had like this like transformation from red to blue thing. And it just seemed cool and interesting. And I don't know if you could kind of like elaborate a little bit on what was going on there, and even maybe the details about those terpenes themselves. And
Well, what knowledge I have on it, I find it a really interesting conundrum, and it's one of my favorite illustrations of alchemical philosophy being so appropriate, and modern molecular science not really being able to explain a situation well. I mean, they explain it well, but they're not giving, there's always, the consciousness has to be at the heart of it, is how I feel, or there's something inexplicable. But so I wasn't creating the terpenes, rather via distillation, they were being created by the plant. We were just distilling a plant. The one then, and we've done it a bit, because it's such an obvious one where new compounds are formed during distillation. It's a really good one to illustrate it. So yarrow, chamomile are sort of the two that are really known to have azulene compounds. So, yarrow turns, the flower is white as is chamomile. But if you've ever seen chamomile essential oil, it's normally called blue chamomile. And it's not because it's from a blue flower, it's because during distillation, azulene compounds form, which are blue. So they're a terpene class. And they're very anti-inflammatory. They're probably, I'd say they're considered the most bioactive compounds that are in chamomile, but they're not in there until you distill it. Or they may be pre-azulenes, I'm not sure. So it's a special one to observe. I think we talked about this, or maybe I talked about it in the post. I said that, I did. It was in the post. I said that that's explained by Paracelsus's spagyric portal idea. And that's like that in the top of the, if you have a picture of an alembic still, we have the distillation chamber and the column goes up and then it comes back down where we recondense it with water and it comes back to earth. So that, the philosophers would say that the plant or metals consciousness or whatever you're working with in distillation is evolved and, upwards into heaven and then is recondensed and comes back to earth in a more perfected form. And this is the case. So with chamomile, it goes up, in that covalent bond chaos, things happen and new compounds form, but there's an intelligence behind those compounds that form. They're synergistic with the other compound in the plant. Modern chemistry, as far as I know, I'm not a chemist, wouldn't explain that well. They'll just say, oh, it's just random. It's beyond random, because in every case, these plants are expressing something that is relevant to their pre-existing consciousness or spectral profile,
And is it a common occurrence that new compounds are formed and created from the act of distillation, or is it a little bit of a rare instance that only particular plants have this sort of reaction? Or
well, with metals, it happens every time. With plants, I would believe that it happens every time. I haven't got enough access to, you need to be, the testing equipment for this stuff is, a lot. And I haven't looked into the data enough to see what already has been classed. But I think from what I know, I would expect it to happen almost every time, if not every time. Yeah. So certainly alchemy suggests that it would. Also, are all of those things quantifiable? It's just that chamomile, and in this case, it was an Australian native called rose mahogany, which we're obsessed with at the moment. It's very beautiful. It also throws, I think it's diazulene out, which is super blue. And there's different vibrancies of blue. Like yarrow is it looks so blue, it's like paint. It's
wow.
The blue it's so opaque, it looks like paint. Whereas rose mahogany's got this sort of clear sapphire color to the essential oil. If we can get up to the lab, I can show you
There's something too about the blue pigment and compounds that I don't really remember the details, but I think I recall there's some particular properties about blue pigment compounds in general that are pretty they have something very unique in terms of their health benefits or something like that.
I'm sure there is. I think purple as well is particular. One of my old teachers always said that a plant, when it throws the purple phenotype, is evolved into its most powerful medicinal form. And he said it's true for things like tulsi, holy basil. The Krishna purple variety throws a higher yield of essential oils and compounds. So purple's a thing, weed as well. Always people are always searching for this purple color. And I don't know, it's definitely different. I think colors are everything. There's also that blue, that the human eye evolved to see the color blue quite late in the piece as well.
Yeah.
It's definitely the color of the mystics, isn't it?
And I think that there was this thing about when they were, I don't remember what cultures, but they would collect this royal blue pigment that the royalty would wear, and they would stain their robes with it or something like that. And it was very revered and regarded as a very royal type thing. But so I don't know if we talked about it, your plans and your intentions. You were wanting to get some land for your biodynamic operation. And so I think you have an update on that I would love to get you to expand on. That's exciting.
Yeah, so I think last time we were talking, we were just going through the process of buying a little farm in Dalesford, just out of Dalesford, which is where our apothecary is. It's always been the place we knew we would manufacture this area, because we're in an old, I think maybe we talked about this last time. There's some really cool old indigenous wisdom about this area, but we're in an ancient volcanic caldera, very, very big, which is sort of makes up the goldfields area, or a big chunk of the goldfields area where all the gold rush of Australia sort of happened. And we got some land, which I'm looking at now. Quite high elevation, 800 meters above sea level, with 100-foot deep volcanic topsoil, which in Australia is super rare. We don't have topsoil in Australia. It's sort of we missed the last ice age. Everything's dust. When Australia was colonized, we brought sheep in and they just ruined all the soil. Everything's stuffed, So there's, except for these few pockets, there's a really good pocket up in Byron Bay as well, where a lot of people do good work too. Whereas up there, it's in that volcanic caldera up in the north, it's a black obsidian caldera. And down here, it's a white quartz crystal and gold reef. So we have beautiful mineral springs here. It's over 80% of Australia's mineral springs are all located here. So we have this incredibly mineral-rich soil that's very deep and very nutrient dense. And we have beautiful spring water coming out of the ground with which we can water our plants. So we've got, Earth's alchemy that we can never achieve coming out of the ground in like this amazing structured colloidal suspension of evolved minerals. Yeah.
Wow. That's
very
amazing.
intense to drink. It's like a super, like it's very metallic and mineral. Yeah.
Are there any sort of kind of alchemical related operations that you utilize the mineral springs for, or have you found those to be something that you incorporate into any of your processes that are pretty beneficial?
I think they're the best salts one can find. Yeah. Yeah, for specific operations, I think that there's a lot of secrets within mineral water that's produced by the earth. Definitely. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Even just raw, even in its raw form, it's a very powerful medicine. And there's a lot of people that have written about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I do it's probably not as quite as mineral rich, but it's one of the pretty well tested and yeah, like a pretty like over time, like for years, people have been going to this particular spring in Sedona here in Arizona. And that's what I tried to get all my water from personally. Me and like my cousin, we drive down there once a month or something and load up a bunch of 5-gallon containers and just use that as our water. And it's, you just drive up and it's spring, it's going all day, fill up your water. And I just feel like after aside from that, I've been drinking spring water pretty much religiously for, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years now, but I couldn't imagine going back at this point.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I'll show you. I just remembered I've got a little
Oh yeah, let's check it out.
salt beaker here full of mineral water. Hang on a sec.
Cool.
This is just some raw. That's non-purified salt.
Oh wow.
That's just from what? That's 250 mil of spring water. That's the level, and there's some oxidation happening there, but it's just a little experiment to see what was going on. I haven't purified any from this site yet.
And do you air? Do you
They've grown significantly. It's very alive. It's very it's very cool.
do you evaporate it just like open air evaporation, or do you do like a dehydrator or what?
Both. That's just this was just a literal kitchen bench experiment. That's just vacuum filtered and
Oh, okay. Vacuum. Yeah.
room evaporated. But yeah, so that's all the water soluble stuff right there.
Cool. I always like to play with salts, and I have a couple mason jars. I let them just evaporate over time, and it's crazy to see the difference between when I even inside, um, I'll just do sea salts and then I'll evaporate the sea salts with distilled water, and the time it takes to evaporate in the summer versus the winter. Like they can sit there like all winter long, and it's just wild. And
you need an athanor, my friend.
what is that? What is an athanor?
The forge of the alchemist.
Oh, yeah.
The center of the lab.
I do. I know.
We're building one for this winter. Yeah,
oh man, that's gonna be exciting.
Just a small cast iron one now, which
yeah.
that's a job.
So with the land, maybe talk a little bit more about the.
Well, we're getting our biodynamic program sorted. So we're doing that with a lot of the traditional like herbal preparations and homeopathic preparations, which we're manufacturing in our own lab, which is fun. I'm also like, it's also a great place to use my super nutrient density waste that we produce. You know, when we don't calcinate stuff, we have a lot of compostable material, especially from the distillation program. Like, so much native stuff is getting superheated, very nutrient dense, wild harvested stuff, and it's already breaking down from the distillation process, so we can get it straight onto the farm. And we're doing, yeah, you know, there's a lot of tinctures that we've produced that are sitting there available. And we've got a huge arsenal of hydrosol as well, which is all being used. So fun stuff doing alchemy with the soil. And, well, you know, treating it like, the idea is that we're the herbal medicine for the earth that generates the plants that we make the herbal medicine for us with. Absolutely. So it's like, you know, super nutrient dense. Yeah, so we're looking at getting certification for the property, and then we can, everything that we produce from this land, we can have a certified biodynamic thing going. So that's amazing. Well, which is really exciting. Getting lots of crops in. We're getting like a lot of beautiful herbs. The nutrient density is crazy already. We were just like, we had some raised beds where we bought a lot of seed stock in, or genetics in, from our other spots. And we were tasting some yarrow just yesterday from those raised beds with our super nutrient dense soil that we've made before, you know, from like good compost, good volcanic soil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're tasting that. And then we go up and taste the yarrow that's flowering now from the new garden beds. And it's just like, the potency is 10 times. You had to spit the flower out. It was so full of volatiles. Yeah, so we're excited. And that's only 6 months in. You know, every year the soil's going to get exponentially better as we keep improving it with the practices. There's no maximum nutrient density in soil that I'm aware of. I know Paul Gorchi is at like a 35-year trial, and he's still getting more and more nutrient density.
Wow, that's incredible. And so yarrow, generally, that's a pretty high altitude plant, right? So is that why it's pretty conducive, or is it?
It's a very temperate plant, so it needs, you know, it's like, I think, yeah, I mean, with any of the other big reason we're down here is we have a very intense climate. So we go from, and I don't know the conversions to Fahrenheit, but we go from like, you know, just below zero freezing point through winter, like, you know, not for long. Maybe the days are 2 to 4 degrees and the nights might be -3, -5. And then in summer, we're up to like maximums of 40, 42 degrees. Here on this farm, probably 38, because we're a little higher altitude, so we're a little cooler. And in summer, even then, because there's no humidity here, it's very dry, we're getting really high temperatures in the day, like, you know, maybe 20 to 30 degree variance in a day of temperature, which I don't know what that converts to, but, you know, big swings. And that's really only available in the Southern Hemisphere, that sort of climate. And so when temperate herbs are grown in climates like this, they have to produce a lot more defense mechanisms, a lot more terpenes, a lot more essential oils, a lot more tannins. So they're stronger. Herbal medicine grown in like the more intense temperate climate you can get, the better. Like the colder winter is and then the hotter summer is, the better you're going to have your medicine. And high altitude helps a little bit as well because we're closer to UV. But yeah, so the plants are very intense here. And as you know, a lot of our herbal extracts have always come from our plants grown in Dowsford, so they've always benefited from that climate. But now with our new soil program, it's just going to get better and better. We want to evolve every year and slowly get, you know, better and better and better until it's just ludicrous quality, sci-fi quality, you know. So
with your climate and having access to the super nutrient dense soil, I would assume that makes it very conducive to be able to grow particular plants that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be able to. Do you have any plans of any things that you want to focus on or that you're pretty excited about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's about what we can grow in the maximum potency. So there's a lot of herbs that can be grown in lots of places, but can't be grown at the potency we can grow them at. And so like yarrow is one of my favorites for that. It's a very low yielder with essential oil. It's like the cornerstone of our skincare. It's such an incredibly powerful skin herb. But to grow it in a high potency like this and then to extract it these ways, I believe that it's quite a revolutionary herb now, even, because it's been honored properly. And so yarrow is one, echinacea is another. Ginsengs should do very well here. That's the long-term play. We have Siberian ginsengs in already, which are doing really well. And we'll get some Panax species in as well. I think the American ginseng will work quite well as well, Quincifolius. Schisandra should do well here. They're getting really established. Our ashwagandha is super established and kicking along. The calendula, which is a big part of our skincare range as well, is exceptional from here. But any of those volatile plants, like our lavender, our roses, are beautiful. We've got rare genetic roses. They're like the apothecary rose, so they're a really beautiful scented rose that doesn't have the honeyed intensity of rose damascena or rose otto. It's a little more on the floral side, a little bit indole. So I think that's quite special, and no one's really seen a rose. There's a few small guys like us doing some nice rose extracts, but at a commercial level, people could only buy a rose damascena, So things like that, just really high potency expression of mainly traditional European herbs, a few Indian, a few Chinese, and some native Australian stuff too, like Kunzia, which is again big for the skincare. Kunzia is just going to do really well here. It's already kicking along.
Love seeing people do rose stuff because that's one of the ones that's super hard to yield oil from.
Yep.
I tried myself doing a rose petal extract a while ago, and my flask, it's not very big of a flask in general. I tried to fill it pretty full, and I didn't get like any oil out of it at all. But I got hydrosol at least. So
the hydrosol is beautiful, but even then, you're only get like out of a small glass flask, you're only going to get a cup, only 100 ml in, and it's going to start to smell not so great anymore.
yeah.
I've done like 100, 200 liter distillations and been bitterly disappointed with the results.
Yeah.
The hydrosol is beautiful, and we use a lot of rose hydrosol in our skincare as well. So I think the hydrosol is the way to get rose, really. I think that's where it's, We also have the wild, like traditional wild variety of rose here, one of, which is called dog rose. Really special. Some people have made really great spagyrics out of it. So we're getting a lot of that going out here too. It's got like a lemony scent, and it has a 5-petaled flower, which a lot of people like, the Venus doctrine of signatures, 5-petaled flower, and the original rose genetics is 5-petaled, which is cool.
Oh wow. Okay, I did wonder about that because I've heard that correlation, but I was like, well, roses don't, usually have 5 petals, so I was a little confused, but that's awesome.
The dog rose, and it has a higher oil yield too, very slightly, but it's not as floral and perfumey. It's a little more citrusy, lemony.
Yeah. I was actually just on your site recently, and I noticed you guys do perfumes too, and I don't remember if we talked about that or not, but that's awesome. I wanted to ask you, like, what's the difference between, I sort of know a little bit of the answer to this, but not like technically. I feel like you'd be able to elaborate a lot more on it, but like between perfume, colognes, and then like fragrances, like.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there's not much difference between perfume and fragrances now. There should be. They are very different. We've been doing perfume for about 6 years, but only we do like a real small batch once every couple of years, because as you can imagine, it's a lot of work getting all those oils together. And we often have to buy quite a few of them too from really good distillers, and the collection expands, and then we get inspired and we make something cool. This last one was a lot of enfleurage oils that Taylor's been doing. She's been doing like a lot of, do you know about enfleurage? It's like picking, you're picking the flowers by hand and putting them on some sort of fat, and the fat absorbs.
Yeah, I've come across that term.
Beautiful way to do it, and very good for internal preparations as well. But Yeah, and you can then wash the fat in ethanol, distill it, vac distill it, get an absolute from it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, or you can just use the raw fat. So we did some nice like oil-based ones, which were cool. That was the last one that we just did. And then before that, we did some extract de perfumes, or no, eau de parfum. So there's different, that's the different levels. So they say extract de parfum is like the highest percentage of essential oils. And traditional perfume is always alcohol, pure essential oils, and maybe hydrosol. I think the best ones have hydrosol, my personal opinion. Well, and sometimes tinctures too, aromatic tinctures, like yeah, there's quite like violet flower, for example, or violet leaf, you would use a tincture, whereas violet flower, you would need an enfleurage absolute, which can take 4 or 5 years to produce if you're doing it from your own garden. No matter how big your garden is, it's about the length of the season that the violets can produce. So if you're out there every day picking, you know, no matter what your volume of fat is, it needs, you know, 60 to 120 cycles of violet flowers, and the flowering season's not going to be long enough for you to do that. So you might have to do it 2 or 3 years working the same fat to get violet. So in comes fragrances, right? That's a much easier way to do things, is to use synthetic lab-made fragrances, or isolate the terpenes you want using solvents from a particular plant to make it smell like another plant. This is like a huge problem.
Agreed.
There's a big problem, and Enki's like, I mean, that's basically the problem that Enki was born out of, was not just fragrances, but that was a big part of it. Any kind of synthetic or chemical additives in perfume, body care, skin care, all of this sort of stuff that is like totally disruptive and very, you know, like if you want to, I rarely get to talk about the psycho-spiritual, evolutionary, or genetic effects of these things, but they're shocking. On a lower level, we can talk about the physical effects, the endocrine disruption, which is already shocking enough. So we don't go into the esoteric implications of using these things, but definitely at a physical and chemical level, they're horrible. So that's really why I started Enki, because I had that realization, and then, you know, I was already into alchemy and all that sort of stuff, but that got me into producing, you know, we want to produce the most pure products for our skin and our body that we can, and make it commercially viable, which is that's what's been the challenge. I think I was talking to you about this, is that we've been going through the scaling of this process for a long time. And the last 6 months, it's really started to snowball, that we're, you know, we had some big stuff happen in the States. Actually, our products have been reviewed very well over there, and people are starting to see what we're doing. And we've been shipping a lot of stuff over your way, which has been really fun.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, there's a few retailers that are taking us on around. It's starting to take off a little bit over there, which is really fun. And that's enabling us to, you know, I mean, I've been designing the scale to make, you know, spagyric tinctures at scale for the last 4 years. And we've been getting the equipment designed and all that sort of stuff. And now we're really starting to need to build it. So we've been doing that over the last 6 months, and we're keeping up. But yeah, it's fun. Still doing it without one piece of plastic or one kind of chemical of any kind hitting any of the product ever in the process, you know? And that's what we want to be, is very, you know, unparalleled in purity is our goal.
Respect. That's what I am all about trying to highlight. I love anybody's doing the things, especially that, like you said, that we're applying to our own skin or putting in our own bodies. Why would we want anything less than the most pure and healthy substances, you know?
For sure. That's the new age. And then from there as well, like that's like the minimum. What you just said, I feel that should be the minimum that we accept as a society. And then from there, we can be using products on our, you know, as our everyday skin ritual that are revolving our bodies or evolving our psychology or our spirituality, that are inviting us into a, you know, like, what if these everyday ritual products could be something that's evolutionary rather than something that's to the detriment of our consciousness?
Yeah. And that's like one of my huge things with just water too, is because it's like, why is it so uncommon in 2024 to just go and be able to get pure natural water. Like some people think it's weird. Like they'd rather drink like Aquafina or, some
It's wild. It's
some
wild.
some water that's, maybe they'll add some like flavor compounds to it and it tastes a little better. And it just, I'm like, I just want the real
Consistent.
thing that nature provides. That's all. Is that too much to ask for?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a relationship between that and consciousness, I think, that's very clear. But also, you know, even our the sacred water from the sky is not necessarily trustworthy right now.
I
And
know.
like if we're going to make products that are unparalleled in purity, we need it as spring. And that's, so, and it's like, so now we can share that, which is great, but how is it's such a basic thing. Water's so important. I mean, water is the most important. It's so important, especially for the practices and the work that we all need to be doing collectively over the next 1,000 years. We need
Definitely.
water. We need to respect it.
So with some of your perfumes, um, what are a few, one or two that you really love that you like would like to highlight that you feel are something you're pretty proud of or your team that you've produced?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not doing the perfumes anymore. That's Taylor's
Oh,
creation now.
shout
I
out
did it.
Taylor.
Yeah, shout out Taylor. She's been studying perfumery over in Italy, and has sort of finished all of that now and has been creating her own. And those that pre-release, they're sold out now. There was Sol and Lune. So we've always done Sol and Lune. So I did the first 2 rounds, and they were, so Sun and Moon. One's very yang, one's very yin. Yin's always seductive and spiced and mysterious, and yang's kind of like floral and fresh and citrus and a little green. Yeah, and they've always been beautiful. And yeah, it's just so every year we'll do a different evolution or seasonal representation of those two, and they'll be very limited because the amount of essential oil you need is huge, and to do that garden to glass isn't, it's not scalable for us. But yeah, maybe a couple of hundred perfumes a year. It'll be very special release. Most of our essential oils and absolutes we prioritize going into our skincare. So it's mainly the ones that we do in small batches or as a trial or as an experiment that will end up being used for perfume. Something that's smells too special, or we're never going to be able to produce enough of for our skincare. Like rhododendron was a good example. A very small amount of oil was excavated from that plant, but we get decent volumes of the hydrosol, so that goes in our seasonal hydrosol, and it's a big heavy lifter in that toning product. And then the oil can be saved for little perfume projects once we have enough of it over a bit of time. Yeah,
It's beautiful. That's another thing that I've over time, you know, just kind of weaned out of my existence is these kind of cheap artificial scents.
yeah.
And so I've been a fan of following people that are producing like good quality scents now, and that's like a really fun thing for me.
You got to. I mean, I'm sure like how hard it is to audit these companies and who's doing what. And I think this is part of the reason we exist, is trying to raise the bar, raise that minimum benchmark for what people are getting away with as such. But we want to do, we really want to do some, yeah, we really want to do a few, I won't say what now because I'll get in trouble, but we want to do a few perfume additions to our skincare range. The skincare is going through this huge evolution at the moment. We should probably be talking about that actually.
Yeah,
That's another thing. I've been back in the lab for the last 2 months, basically just working on skincare. We're doing some pretty big overhaul and evolutions of the formulas. It's time to make them a lot more potent because we can. We've evolved our garden and our lab process now where we can. There's more herbs we're extracting now that the process hasn't been updated in 3 years, and you can imagine how much bigger our distillation and extraction programs got in 3 years. So there's some really cool new herbs coming to the skincare that's, I think, really going to make it like world-class skincare.
Yeah. So you mentioned a big one. I think you said a big one for skincare that you feel is a pretty good staple is yarrow. What are some of the other ones that are major players?
Yeah, I mean, yarrow is definitely it's the one I've been working a lot with, as well as calendula. So we've been working with different infusion methods, so that we can do, yeah, like a more complete extraction of the herbs in a broader spectrum. So we're looking at like ultrasonic infusion and heat assisted vacuum, different agitation methods, lots of stuff like that. And we've come up with a very cool, which will be talked about soon, way of doing that. So these upgraded, they're sort of absolute infused infusions, and I can't talk about the rest of it yet because the team won't. We're not ready to talk about it. So they're coming soon to the skincare, like in like I think like 5-6 weeks. We're doing a little brand refresh alongside that, so that's going to be really exciting actually. It's going to be fun, or it is a lot of fun right now. So yarrow and calendula are sort of they're going into the day serum and the night serum, as well as we've been working with chlorella extraction, which is a bit out there.
Oh, okay.
Really excited about chlorella. It's UV protective, and radiation detoxifying and radiation protective. So our day serum's the Aegis. It's the mythical shield. So it's always been about that. Like there's some really powerful extracts in there already, like pomegranate. We do a CO2 extract of that in there, and it's helps with the protective layer and restoring the barrier of the skin. But yeah, adding chlorella into that will make it a really cool synergistic blend, along with calendula, which is boosting collagen production. Like a lot of people in skincare at the moment are wanting to use up. It's probably not super interesting to your listeners, but just quickly, a lot of people are using like hyaluronic acid and different like synthetic compounds to make their skin have a collagen boost quite quickly, and therefore their skin looks fresher and nicer. So people are looking for like a cosmetic edge to their skincare, and so far that's only being achieved with. There's a couple of cool companies that are doing similar stuff to what we're doing. Definitely, we're not completely unique in it, although our potency is exceptional. With calendula extracted right, grown right, really good stuff. There's other plants as well. Like I won't, unfortunately, I'm not going to name all of them for you, but calendula specifically boosts collagen production pretty significantly. So you're not going to get like one application is not going to do what HLA is going to do and make your skin just like puff up with collagen straight away. But over about a week, you'll get a pretty similar result, and it won't damage your skin long term. And like what happens when you're using HLA is your body stops producing collagen. So then you don't put it on and your skin gets saggy and you have to put it on, and people are getting into this rhythm. Whereas calendula will actually not just do it over time, it will also restore people's skin who have had the negative effects from retinol or HLA, because it'll teach your skin how to do that again. It's not just calendula. Sea buckthorn and rosehip are playing a big part in that. It's quite a yarrow as well. It's quite a symbiotic form. Like it's a formulation. It's not just what each herb can do. It's when they're put together and weaved together. Frankincense also has some applications in that formula, which is in the fountain of youth. So we do the Aegis and the fountain of youth, the shield for the day, and then the anti-aging, rejuvenating night one. And that's where yarrow is, because yarrow has an incredible ability to literally regenerate skin. And
wow, that's amazing.
Cosmetics, I don't know. It's crazy.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to ask too, but you pretty much kind of answered a lot of it. I was going to say what makes these the properties of these plants so conducive for skin, but like you're saying, like that collagen regenerative kind of quality, that's amazing. I had no idea.
I think that most of the studies are all done on a lot of these plants, and they show these effects but quite weakly. So like the effects are there and they're like, yeah, they're pretty weak. And then you look at the quality of the plants and the extraction methodology that the extract was prepared with, and then the results in the study, you're like, of course it's weak. So, we need to do a lot of testing here, and we're doing it. We're partnered with some really cool chemists that are at the local university, and they're working on a study and some testing to show our spectrum. We've had preliminary testings, like internally we know where we sit, but we want to get it done so that we can be a little more public with it. to actually show what's in our stuff, what the spectrum is, why it's so much more potent. It's not so much just about potency, it's also about the spectrum of compounds. Like we know that we have the broadest spectrum of compounds extractable when compared to any other commercial company, you know, barring great spagyric practitioners who obviously do the same thing, if or better, at a commercial and scalable level. And that's what we're trying to do. The broadest array of compounds and the highest potency we can get them.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on, because I've heard or read this jojoba oil.
Yeah.
I think I've read that it's one of the most compatible oils with the skin's natural oils or
Yeah.
something like that. What are your thoughts on that as like kind of a natural base
Yeah,
for
we
some?
use it as a base for our Aegis serum, the day serum. It's really good in the daytime. We think there's better oils at night, like hemp seed.
Hmm.
And we use macadamia in the day and the night as well. It's a great native Australian. Macadamia is incredible. It's not so well researched because it's native Australian. It's not so prevalent in the world market. It's very expensive, but it has the perfect balance of omega acids, like perfect, like better than any seed or nut on the planet.
Wow.
And and then jojoba is very similar in structure to sebum, which is the emollient our skin naturally produces. So that's why jojoba works really well. I think really it just penetrates really well. So when people love jojoba because it does not clog the pores, it doesn't sit heavy. It's like the lightest oil you can have. You know, a lot of people who are like, oh, I'd never put oil on my skin, which they are, because if they're using a lotion, they're using oil. It's just disguised as a different substance. Um, but you know, even people who are like really sensitive to heavier creams or oils that use jojoba, then you know it'll sink straight in. Like our day serum is very popular with people who want like really lightweight stuff. Yeah.
How would something like olive oil compare? Is there any downsides or is it pretty decent or
Funnily enough, I love olive oil for the skin.
I do too.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. It's got what's the compound? I can't remember them all. Skylar. It's squalene or squalane, one of those two. I think it's squalene is an olive oil, which is, and then I think our body produces squalane, which has incredible skin healing benefits. It's a big part of our sebum. So I think it's like olive oil is the only plant source of it, and then the only animal source is like some sort of deep fish.
Oh wow.
Um, and so yeah, it's got squalene in it, which is apparently quite good. There's companies that sell like synthetic squalene. I think The Ordinary is a big company. It's synthetic. I'd never use it, but yeah,
Yeah.
they do like a synthetic squalene that obviously has some benefits. Yeah, so olive oil is cool, but you know, that's the only cooking oil that's cool.
Yeah. What about coconut oil?
Coconut oils, I mean, if you're a guy,
Yeah.
coconut oil is probably pretty good, unless you've got really fine pore structure. It clogs the pores. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a little different for women generally.
Yeah, women tend to have finer pores. I mean, it depends on your, you know, on your
Okay.
skin, your ethnicity,
Yeah, I hadn't
that.
considered that.
But yeah, so like yeah, very fine pored skinned people need really low comedogenic oil. So our stuff's like as low as you can get because it suits everybody.
What?
Ours is like because we can control how our stuff's pressed. We know where we get it. We can control exactly how our oil is going to sit and penetrate the skin, and we do
Mhm.
a lot of work with that. And it's going to, you know, as we're growing jojoba here too, so as that comes, it'll get even more serious. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the word you used? Comogenic or
Comedogenic. Yeah. So that's
com
like the comedogenic. Yeah. That's the rating of how easily it's kind of like the molecule size of the oil, like how fat the acids are,
Oh,
how
that's a
they're gonna
cool word.
penetrate. I had to have when trying to launch a skincare company. I had to learn all about that stuff.
I bet. I bet you've learned all kinds of interesting stuff. There was a term that you mentioned earlier. You said ultrasonic extraction or something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little thing we've been experimenting with. Yeah.
What is that?
It's using frequency to extract. Is less esoteric than it sounds.
Hmm.
We're trying to align that with our philosophy. That's proving. I think we will do it. I think we will do it. But at the moment, where ultrasonic technology is right now, it's kind of just blasting it with frequencies that are potentially not ideal. So we're refining that, and we're working with some manufacturers on something at the moment.
That's awesome.
And I know that it can be done because there's other guys in the States that do ultrasonic tinctures and things like that.
Mm.
It's not perfect for tincture extraction. It may be a good adjunct for tincture extraction. I think probably not, but I think with our vacuum extraction, that's where we want to stay. But for our infused oil extractions, it's a good adjunct as well. We're doing like a philosophically enhanced. It's like we haven't worked out what we're going to call it or how we're going to explain it at the moment, which is why I can't talk too much about it. But we're doing a philosophically assisted oil infusion extraction using some alchemically manufactured substances, and that's going to really, I think, elevate the game a lot. And if we can get the frequencies right, then we can take a notch. But basically, ultrasonics, it blasts your liquid with a sonic vibration, a frequency, and it's so intense, it rips everything at a cellular level. So it's an intracellular extract, and you can literally see it all moving. Like it's like it creates an intense chaos field inside but with the right frequencies, it could create a really nice field.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exciting. And like,
I mean, if anyone's listening that knows about ultrasonics and has some interesting ideas about making it a good frequency, hit me up for sure.
Definitely.
Really interested in looking at.
Yeah, I was following this woman for a while. I listened to a few of her interviews. I think her name was Veda Austin, and she kind of mimicked some of the work done by this other guy, but took it a little bit further. You know, you may have heard about similar experiments with exposing certain frequencies just to water and then like freezing them in ice.
Yeah.
But she would do all these various different frequencies and then freeze them and show the crystalline structure in the ice, and get like very interesting different patterns consistently. And it's just really cool because I mean, it absolutely demonstrates that it is containing some sort of memory of structuring with the water. And so, of course, yeah, if you get the frequencies right and if you're doing something like that, man, that's going to be amazing.
Well, this is why we can't get the frequencies are already very wrong. And so we can't use that technology in its current incarnation, but we can definitely manufacture. We've got a guy who knows how to do it. We're looking at it, but he doesn't know frequency, and I don't either. Anyway, one of my friends listening will probably call me after he hears this.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned earlier different ginsengs, and so like like Siberian, Panax, American. I think those are like the common popular forms. And I don't know a whole lot about them. I think I've heard some people say certain versions of ginseng can be like way too overstimulating. I guess it also might depend on how it's uh how it's done or what form it's put into. If you're doing a a spagyric form, probably obviously it's going to be much more conducive. But what are a little bit of the differences in terms of utilization, or like why somebody would choose a Siberian over an American ginseng or a Panax or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, yeah, there's a few answers to that. I'll start with, yes, there's a lot of caution when it comes to ginseng, especially in TCM communities, traditional Chinese medicine. They don't like to give ginseng because it's very heating, it can be very stimulating. For the right person, for the right candidate, it's phenomenal. But TCM practitioners tend to not like, if something's not conducive to everybody, like it's not considered a universal tonic herb, they're going to caution against it, which is fair. In low broad spectrum doses, that heatiness, I would say any Chinese medicine person listening to this would agree that in small broad spectrum doses, that's not a danger. It's when when Chinese medicine practitioners make decoctions of Panax ginseng, there's a lot of Panax ginseng in there, and it's intensely bitter and it's intensely heating, because they're doing like hardcore medicinal doses. Chinese medicine preparations are very strong, if they're done. I think that's the problem, is that they've become nowhere near as strong now that there's pilules and granules and different ways of preparing it. When they were fresh at home prepared decoctions, they were very intense, and practitioners that still do that know that that's how it is. I'm not sure if it's like that in the States or not. In America, in Australia, it's very much, there's not so much fresh herbs given for people to decoct at home, but it used to be. So they're very intense. So I wouldn't worry about that. Unless you have a particularly, I wouldn't worry about that any more than I would worry about using ashwagandha.
Mm.
Some people don't react well to ashwagandha. You'll know if it's you, and then you'll stop using it, right? So we already produce Siberian ginseng quite a lot. That's in our male potency formula. And rhodiola is something that I would like. If you can say ashwagandha is a ginseng, if you can say Siberian ginseng is a ginseng, then you can pretty much say rhodiola is a ginseng, because none of them really are. Siberian ginseng maybe is a little closer, but because it produces little red berries. So Panax ginseng and any of the Panaxes, so American ginseng is Panax clincifolius, they're true ginsengs. And they have those ginseng appropriate compounds in them. And, then you've got poor man's ginsengs, as I like to call them. So astragalus root, which we grow all the poor man's ones right now. We got astragalus root, we got rhodiola, we got ashwagandha, we got shatavari. That's Schisandra is a good poor man's adaptogen. And Jiaogulan, which is known as poor man's ginseng. That one's actually probably one of the more valuables, because it does contain ginseng compounds in its leaf. So yeah, we use Siberian ginseng. Siberian ginseng's more good as an energizer. Panax ginseng is very energizing, but it's more vitally energizing, like internal fire, prana. Whereas Siberian ginseng's a little more adrenal energizing. Mm-hmm. Ashwagandha is more like adaptogenic. If you are a bit burnt out, it will knock you to the ground. It will not energize you.
Oh,
okay. So different.
I think I had a confusion on what adaptogenic meant. For some reason, my impression was that it was like, it could kind of go either way,
There's two meanings. Yeah.
But it did the right way or something.
There's two meanings, and it's actually a really interesting topic. There's two meanings, and one of them is, they're both kind of one of them accidentally explains everything correctly. So they say an adaptogen was originally, I think the original definition of an adaptogen came out of Russia, and they were studying Siberian ginseng and rhodiola. I think they were the two. I'm pretty sure that was right. And they defined adaptogen as herbs that have no specific action, like they're not specifically actioned against any type of disease or malady, but they have a general encouraging effect on the body. Encouraging is probably the wrong word. But that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So that kind of, I would equate the Chinese term of tonic herbalism, which is always also a confusing term, to that, because in the West, tonic means tightening and toning of a tissue, and in the East, it means generally good for the body, depending on who you learnt from, or which, so it's a bit of a funny one too. So adaptogens and tonics are kind of, they're loose terms that probably should be defined a little bit better. But people have been indoctrinated into one school of thought, so they don't want to, no one wants to communicate about it. I like all schools of thought. So adaptogens were originally categorized like that. I believe, if I'm wrong, someone will tell us, I'm sure. And then they became more associated with vital force revitalization. So adaptogens became, like specifically about adrenals. and adrenal health. So adaptogens became adrenally revitalizing herbs, which fits with the original context of adaptogens, right? Well, then, I mean, and then we have adaptogens that, sorry, some Wi-Fi going on in the background.
No worries.
Then we have adaptogens that like balance out an axis within the body, which I think is what you were speaking to. So if you have an adrenal adaptogen, it's going to balance the kidney functions, adrenal renal action. Or an endocrine adaptogen will balance estrogen progesterone or something like that. So that's also true, but not all adaptogens do that. Like chaga is an adaptogen. It doesn't balance any axis out, as far as I know. Probably does. Maybe it balances the immune system. It may have that. It may have a balancing action on the immune system. But it has a general uplifting, encouraging, or tonifying effect on the body. I shouldn't say tonifying, tonic effect on the body without having a specific action. Like it doesn't cure a cold. It doesn't, it's not antibiotic, you know, but it has a general increase in well-being on the organism with which it's been applied. So therefore it's a adaptogen. So that's my understanding of adaptogens. Adaptogens should have a general, they should be like the original word for tonic from the East, which was that it has a general uplifting impact on the organism. People might argue with me about that.
And so would something like Shazandra, would that be considered like tonic?
Yeah, by me, I would consider that a tonic and an adaptogen.
Okay.
But if I was a modern Western herbalist and I said it's a tonic or it's tonifying, that would be incorrect because it would have to tighten and tone the tissues, which incidentally Shasandra does a little bit, but that's besides the point.
In your research and estimation, like what if you were to kind of just throw out like 5 herbs that you would consider like some of the most overall beneficial universally. I don't know if it works like that, if it doesn't. But I don't know, maybe just some that like you feel are just like very intense powerhouses of goodness for overall well-being. What would you say?
These top 5 herbs. I could give let's say like I'll give you a few top herbs to have and then a few top herbs to grow, right? Because we can't grow everything.
Right.
But top herbs to grow that like pretty much everyone can grow is definitely calendula and yarrow. In the modern day, calendula and yarrow both have an affinity for the digestive tract and a restorative action on the digestive tract, which is a big problem in the world now. Leaky gut syndrome, gluten intolerances, you know, all of these things. Calendula and yarrow are really good against. They're also just very restorative. You know, the best extraction is in a tea, in a decoction at home. So you don't need fancy equipment to extract them for drinking, for internal use. And, they help the skin internally as well. Obviously much harder to extract to put on topically, but yeah, really good at home tea herb. Burdock would be right next to those two. Burdock's amazing. It's a great everyday tonic. It's nutrient dense. It has a lot of minerals in it. It's a powerful anti-cancer herb. It's a good one. I love its name. Arctium lapa is beautiful. It's a cool plant. It's very mystic. Top plants to get Schisandra berry would be number 1 for me. Shisandra's great. Unfortunately, it's really hard to get Schisandra not from China. We're growing it, but it's going to be, we're never going to, we'll be producing a tonic in very limited amounts as of like what's about to go live in the next few weeks, actually. But that'll be very small production. So Schisandra is incredible. Astragalus. If anyone wants to manufacture herbs or like anyone's into alchemy or spagyric works, Astragalus is a beautiful herb and was traditionally recommended to initiates as a herb to start working with. And
Oh, wow.
I know why. And if you do it, you'll know why too. Um, yeah. Mullein I love because for me, it's the strongest emphasis of satin. I love Solomon seal as well. I feel like Solomon seal could rescue us all. It has rescued me just recently again. It's a great herb. Elderberry for the immune system. And then, I mean, you can't beat the mushrooms. Hey,
Like reishi?
reishi, chaga,
Yeah.
lion's mane, cordyceps. And if you want cordyceps, you have to get Enki's cordyceps. It is by far the most potent cordyceps you will ever, like, I think we're 30 years ahead of the game on how good our cordyceps is.
Wow. Tell
And,
me about why that is,
Okay. Well, I mean,
if you can.
I think we're years ahead on all of our extraction, right? In our tinctures. Our spagyric tinctures are definitely, because of the scalability that we've gotten to, because of our ability to provide them, they're really far ahead. Our reishi and our chaga have you tried out? Have we sent you? We got to send you some. Hey.
No, but I'd love to. I would definitely.
Yeah.
You're getting me pumped up about it. So,
Well, now we've kind of solved our American supply chain thing. America is accessible to us now for shipping and all of that. So we'll get some stuff over to you. We just never wanted to do it until we could know that it was going to be reliable, and it took a little bit to get it reliable. But yeah, so we'll send you some stuff. But yeah, the chug of the reishi are already, the lion's mane, the turkey tail is great. The cordyceps is really exceptional, mainly because there's a bigger market weakness for us to exploit than the other medicinal mushrooms. Like, at least you can still get good wild harvested chaga and reishi. I mean, you can't from China, which is where I think pretty much every extraction company, I don't know about the States, but most of the extraction companies in the world are just buying a pre-extracted mushroom product from China, right? Like, you'd say 90%, maybe more, of the volume of medicinal mushrooms sold worldwide is just going to be straight out of China. And extracted over there too. That's the biggest problem. It's hard to oversee quality if you're getting your extracts done in, and even powdered extracts are kind of pointless in my opinion anyway, because they're not preserving the volatiles, which is the most important part. So that's part of why our cordyceps are so powerful, but it's also the only commercially available wild population of cordyceps in the world.
wow.
The cordyceps gunnii or sinensis. So, sorry, I lost my mic.
No worries.
I was saying we have the only wild population that's commercially available of cordyceps gunnii or sinensis in the world. So I'm not sure about militaris, basically because I don't think militaris is very important. Is very important. But sinensis is the Chinese variety. You'll see if you ever buy a medicinal mushroom product, most of them will say cordyceps sinensis CS-1, which is grown in a tank in China, artificially inoculated with cordyceps, super disgusting, grown in a toxic waste pit, basically. I mean, maybe a very clean waste pit, but still definitely with toxicity.
Yeah.
Like sterile, but not clean, not clear of heavy metals and things like that, So we're lucky enough to have cordyceps gunnii, which is the native Australian variant. It has a wild population here. To get wild population cordyceps sinensis, you would be looking at Bhutan as the only place in the world that's clean and has it available, and you'd be paying $12,000 a kilo.
Wow.
We have, for AAA grade. We're getting AAA grade in our backyard.
That's
and
amazing.
So we don't have to sell it for $12,000 a kilo. We can, we're selling it for 50 mil for 77 AUD. So great value for a super premium high-end product.
Absolutely. You also mentioned CO2 extracts. I don't remember off the top of my head how that works or what it's used for. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on.
It's a good solventless extraction. I think I'm not super excited about it. I did want to talk to you about new philosophical solvent extractions for botanicals. CO2 is very valuable. It's probably the best way of making a solventless absolute. It's really superior for fruit extracts because it's cold. It's very cold though, so it's going to freeze things, and we don't really want to freeze things when we're being philosophical about our extraction methods. But it's been a necessary bridge for us for the last few years for our fruit extracts for our skincare, because it's a very superior profile of constituents that it extracts. And it's completely non-toxic. There's no solvent. It's just carbon dioxide. As soon as you pull it out of the machine, it all goes out. The CO2 turns back into gas and disappears. But yeah, it's a really good way to do it. I think the cannabis industry in the States really popularized it as a really clean extraction method that's cold and leaves all the constituents raw. So we like it. It's good for perfumery too. I think CO2 extraction at Enki will find a place more in perfumery than it will in skincare, as our new, more philosophical extraction techniques are replacing it in the skincare lineup. So we're looking at doing ethanol's great for absolute extraction, except it doesn't capture all non-polar and polar compounds. So there's these polar and non-polar solvents, and this is, it becomes really important when you start looking at philosophical solvents. And there's some things here we're trying to solve. And
so I think I've heard this done before with like a dual extract. Is that the same or is that a different thing?
it's not super efficient. It's an efficiency that can be reached with more philosophically prepared stuff. And this sort of brings me into that, we talked a little bit about ORMES last time, and it's some of the answers to both of these questions are the same thing. It's all about the secret fire